All right, everybody. So I wanted to go over a quick kind of bit of way of testing some of these old Milsurp rifles that methods that I have discovered, over the very small amount of time that I've taken into getting into Milsurp rifles and old guns that I've learned through either experience by getting burned on some pretty awful purchases, or just learning from a good friend of mine who happens to be a collector like me and has been doing it a lot longer than I have. So, some of my friends, people I talk to, have been asking me, what should I look for in an old gun like this? Because a lot of this stuff is not very obvious, very apparent for people who are not as experienced with the field, like I am, or like a good friend of mine is. But, because when I first started out, I definitely got burned on a few things that if I had checked for it earlier, if I had known what to look for, it wouldn't have been such an issue and I wouldn't have made the purchase that I did. So I'll go over a quick few tips that may help some other folks out there, and maybe even your experience too, when dealing with old Milsurp rifles, and just what to look for. And this comes with a big caveat in that it's really hard to do these kinds of tests if you don't have the gun in person. So if you're buying online, say at Gunbroker or something like that, you have to know the kinds of questions to ask of the seller. And in a lot of cases, depending on who's selling it, they may not know themselves either. So you may be SOL. You can always request more information, more pictures from somebody that you're bidding on something on, you're buying from somebody online, because at the end of the day, it's your money. Take your time, be patient, don't get burned on things, because that's what's happened to me, and it's a very, very expensive mistake, and you just don't feel good about it later. So, what I have here is a Muzzle 9130. Really nothing special about this gun. I did refinish the stock on this one because I wanted a project and an experiment, and as you can see, or maybe not, on the lighting's kind of bad for this, but on this upper handguard here, the paint is basically the paint, varnish, finish, whatever the heck they use on these things is basically chipping away, and I kept the upper handguard unrefinished to show an example of how the rest of the stock used to look before I refinished it myself. That's a story for another day, though. But I'm just using this as an example because Mosin Nagants are very, very common, and these rifles too are suspect when you are checking them out, because there's a lot of history with these things. They've been used, abused. They've been through a lot, and people may or may not have taken care of them over the years. So you need to do your part and check it out. So we'll start with the outside and kind of work our way in. So let's go from the muzzle end here, and I'm gonna open this up just to make sure that we are in fact clear. Come on, get out of there. There we go. So when you're checking out one of these rifles, one of the most important things, some of the most important things you need to check are the bore, the rifling, and the muzzle condition itself. So number one for bore is you really want to get inside the receiver here, and like way up in there. Get a light, and really get in there. And what you're looking for when I say bore is, if it's a good condition bore, there's a little ring that you'll see basically right on the outside of right before it hits the rifling. That is what I mean by bore. So what you want to see is basically a bright, shiny ring, where everything else in the receiver is going to be like a dark, kind of like black color, the color of the actual metal, right? For a good condition bore, you want to see a nice, bright ring. And that'll tell you the bore has been taken care of. Corrosive ammunition, if it has been shot through it, has been cleaned out of it. And that's important, for a number of reasons, but that's really what you want to look for, is you want that nice, bright, shiny ring. If you don't see that, or if you see a dull ring, that means a lot of corrosive ammo has been shot through that gun, and it just wasn't cleaned or wasn't maintained properly, and there's probably a lot of other issues that are going to be present on that gun if you have a dark bore. So number one, bore. Two, rifling. I can't really get this on camera, but if you look, the way I tend to get it is, this rifle is clear, so don't go crazy, is I will tend to look at the gun from this side of the barrel. Obviously, make sure your rifle is clear before you do that. And basically, what you do is you take a light and you stick it down in the receiver here, and then you look at the other side and just look down the barrel. Now, what you should see is a very, very strong and very apparent, clear-looking rifling. It should be very clear and apparent to you, hey, there's rifling in there. If you've ever seen, you know, like the James Bond intro where the little muzzle or the barrel's going across the screen, it should look like that. You should see the kind of spiraling motion. Now, some of those rifles I have seen before have had damage inside the rifling. They've had a lot of dirt, dust, grime, whatever, and honestly, without cleaning out the barrel and getting a patch through there, it's hard to tell what a lot of those things are. Sometimes, depending on where you find it and who had it last, it could just be something as simple as dust, you know, or some leftover grease, or it could be something as bad as, you know, actual rust, corrosion. God forbid there's a blockage in the barrel, right? The rifling could be damaged due to some accident or something like that. There's really no easy way to tell from just a simple test like that. And that's really what the majority of, I think, a lot of your folks out there are going to be able to do, is stick a light up into the receiver right there and get a look at the rifling. So very important, if you want a shooter that's not going to keyhole at 10 yards, you absolutely have to make sure that your rifling is good to go. Next up, what I like to do is what I like to call a muzzle test, right? And what you do is take some either real or deactivated ammo. Some shops, some people don't like it when you use real ammo for this test, because it's a safety hazard, I guess, but if you ask nicely, I'm sure they'll let you do it. So I got some aptly named nugget food here, and we'll go and take some ammo here. And I have just a regular Muzzle and Gaunt round here. And what you do is you go up to the muzzle here and you insert your bullet nose first, just like that. And you have it kind of stick out like that, right? Now, the purpose of this is to determine whether or not that this that your particular rifle barrel in question has been counterbored, has it been cut down, has it shot corrosive ammo that has eaten away at the very tail end of the rifling here of the barrel. And that's very, very important, because I have seen cases where in order to save some of the rifling of an old barrel, what a smith will do is he'll counterbore into the barrel, and that means he'll cut basically into it and try to basically get the rifling or the barrel down to where the rifling is still good. And that can work for a limited number of cases. It's not the best solution to the problem, but it can and has worked before. In some cases, some of the older military rifles that a lot of their countries may have used corrosive ammunition, and they didn't properly clean it, or whoever shot it last didn't properly clean it, you'll often find that the corrosive ammo and the salts and everything else in there has eaten away the metal, particularly at the end and at the beginning of the barrel. Most often it doesn't have a whole lot of wear in the middle. It's usually at the beginning and the end of the barrel. So these corrosive salts literally will eat away at the metal over time. If you leave it to sit there, if you have adverse conditions, it will just destroy the metal, it'll destroy the rifling at the end of the barrel, and that will absolutely kill your accuracy for that weapon. I've seen it myself, because the very first Steyr M1895 rifle that I bought, I did not do that inspection because I didn't know any better, and it was corroded and counterbored almost down to the actual stock itself. So when I took this bullet and I tested that, it sat all the way up to the shoulder of the case, which is absolutely terrible. You never ever want to see that. If your muzzle test does that, if it goes sitting up, like literally up here to like the shoulder of a case, or you know, way low into there, you have a keyhole machine. It will not fire accurately at all, no matter what you do to it, no matter how hard you try. That rifle's done, or at least that barrel is done. So, oftentimes not worth your extra effort, time, and money. Now, so what you do want to see for this test is, if you see there how it's sitting, oops, hit the table, you'll see the actual brass jacket of the bullet itself is sitting outside of where it sits in the muzzle. And this is as far low into the barrel as I can get it. It won't go any further. But we still have plenty of actual projectile and bullet sitting there. And that's what you want to see. Because that tells you that the end of the rifling here is what you want it to be. And it will shoot just fine. So yeah, the reason why a lot of shops get antsy with that is because you're putting a live round on the muzzle of a gun. It's a very strange test, but a very important one to do, and one that has saved me countless times from buying rifles that I thought looked good. The bore was good, the rifling was good, externally it looked fine, or maybe a little bit beaten up, but not a big deal. But then I do the muzzle test, and that thing is just shot to shit. So, very, very, very important test that you do for these old rifles. Now, that's pretty much all with the metal components of the gun. When you get to like the triggers and like magazine housings and things like that, those are not really as important to the shootability of the gun. It can affect it somewhat, especially like a Mosin that has a shitty magazine. It can get all kinds of locked up. But as far as like it being a practical, useful shooter, getting some kind of accuracy and not blowing up in your face, those are the big three things that I like to check for. Now, with a lot of these old rifles, obviously you want to check Headspace too. That's a whole different discussion. That's something that I don't really trust myself doing. That's something that you'd have to go to like a smith to get it done. There are tools and gauges out there to do it yourself, but I would feel more comfortable getting a gunsmith to do that rather than Joe Blow with his gauge that he bought off Midway USA. So, that's just me. The next couple things that I tend to go over for an old Milsurp rifle is just the external condition. How does it look, right? Because the external condition quite often will not tell you the entire story of a gun. And from what I've seen in some cases, there are certain, depending, every rifle is different in their design, but for the most part, most of these old Milsurp rifles are, barrel receiver, sights, wood stock, lower handguard, upper handguard, butt plate, the usual assortment of things. So when you're looking at the wood stock itself, look for big obvious stains. Oftentimes you'll find stains right around like the receiver ring area up here. You'll find stains all along the handguard. You'll find stains up here, where the end of the handguard meets the barrel. Sometimes you'll find stains like on the receiver sides here, where the actual receiver sits inside the stock. You'll find stains where the magazine well is in the trigger guard. That's really not uncommon. And oftentimes you'll find a very, very dark spot right here where your hand would be. And that makes sense considering that's where you hold it. That's where a lot of dirt, grime, your own oil from your hands gets. It makes sense for that area to be dark. Now, there's a lot of reasons for these stains. Anything could be simple wear and tear. It could be something as morbid as, dried blood of somebody who died using this, or somebody he shot even. It could be that. It's kind of hard to tell. At least I don't really know how to tell the difference. It could just be oil stains from a factory, from regular maintenance. It could be mud got on it or something and they just couldn't get it out. It could be any number of things, but it is a clue for you to go and check underneath the wood and everything to see exactly what has seeped into the rest of the wood, what has gotten onto the metal itself. Very, very important to check. And one thing I always do with new rifles, at least new to me rifles, is I will destock it. So I will literally take this entire action out of the stock and separate all the metal parts from the wood as much as I can. I don't take things out like the The holes that the screws go into in here in the stock, I won't take those out. I leave those in the stock. I don't take the reinforcement crossbars like on Mosin's, this little piece here. I don't take that out. Oftentimes I won't take out sling attachment points either. I'll leave those in there. Like Mosin, these little slots here, I will not bother to take the metal out of those. It's just not worth the effort. And oftentimes with a handguard as well, upper and lower, especially on Mosin's, you'll see this metal cap here and the metal cap on the bottom here. I do not remove those either. So remove the metal pieces from the wood as much as feasibly possible, and check the condition of the metal where the wood was touching it. That's very, very important, because a lot of times you'll see that on the outside the gun looks great, with the wood and everything looks awesome, but then you take the stock off and you start seeing the real picture. And what you'll find is, on a lot of barrels, especially the wood stocks, you'll see underneath of the barrel here, you'll see a lot of pitting, a lot of rust, a lot of wear, because moisture gets trapped in a lot of these handguards, and it stays there, and it attaches to the metal. Water and metal don't get along very well, and with most militaries, they just don't bother to remove the stock every time that they're doing routine maintenance and oil up all sides of the barrel. They just don't do that, and a lot of people who own these guns don't tend to do that either. So important to check that for condition if that matters to you. In some cases it can be really, really bad. In some cases it's just minor pitting that doesn't actually affect the function of the gun whatsoever. It just kind of affects the total value of the gun, if you will. So yeah, looking for the obvious signs of like rust, pitting, things like that on all the metal parts of the gun, especially underneath the stock. It's very important to check that. What else can I think of? I guess the last thing I would check for is matching parts. So if you have matching parts, that gun is more than likely in better condition than something that has mismatched parts. In general, that's what I've found. Also be wary of replacement parts, like on a lot of these older rifles, original parts would have been replaced by somebody for whatever reason. Sometimes you'll find rear sights have been completely removed or replaced by the incorrect type of sight. Front sights may be removed. Barrels may have been cut down. There may be duffel cuts. Duffel cuts are very interesting if you manage to find something like that. I happen to have one myself. It's a very, very cool piece. I guess the other thing would be just make sure everything works. Function test the bolt. Function test the trigger pull if they'll let you do that. Work the sights. Actually pull the sights up, push them down. Get a good look like underneath the sight base here, because oftentimes there's a lot of rust and corrosion underneath there too. Make sure the sight ladder actually moves. Look for import marks. Sometimes on some of these older rifles that were brought in before that was required, you won't find any import marks, which I think adds value. What else to say about these? Obviously make sure it's the right caliber too, because you'd be surprised how many of these old guns were actually rechambered to different weird calibers that should never have been done in the first place. I mean, there were some cases where even Mosin Nagants had 30-06 conversions done on them. So just something to look out for. It's really handy to have if you can find snap cap rounds for some of these Milsurp rifle calibers. Those are fantastic tools to use, because you can safely load the action, you can safely chamber around, pull the trigger, and you can function test the gun without ever having putting a live round in the gun, which is perfect. Now, the only thing I don't like about snap caps is that they don't necessarily have the same kind of projectile shape as this. You kind of want a Spitzer shaped kind of pointed FMJ bullet like that. Those are the best to do muzzle tests with. I found some soft point ammo tends to sit a little bit lower into the muzzle test, so I don't like using soft points as much. And the snap cap rounds, as I've found, mostly are rounded at the top, so they don't necessarily give an accurate muzzle test for you, but it is still an option if you're not comfortable with using live ammo, or the store won't let you use live ammo to do that test. So Those are just the quick things I could think about for doing tests for old Milsurp rifles like this. Whatever you do, yeah, don't count this video as like 100% all the things that you should do and that's it. Please, please, please do your own research. Find out exactly what you're bidding on, what you're buying, what you want exactly, because many people have said, well, I want a Mosin Nagant. Okay, well, what kind of Mosin Nagant do you want? Right? There's all kinds of varieties and stuff out there, but please, 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 please do your research. Really make sure the gun is what you want it to be for your purposes, and if it doesn't feel right, more than likely it's not right. So don't be like me. Don't get burned on stuff. Don't waste your money on something that ends up not being what you want it to be. And yeah, I said this is going to be a short video, but we're already at like 20 some minutes, so I'm just going to end it there. And yeah, please do your research. Don't get burned, but enjoy the hobby, and I hope you find something great out there. So we'll see you next time.